and show you what I'm up to with the new amplifier that is working very nicely now. All right, here it is. And I'm gonna give me a chance to fool around with setting up whatnot, because I bet you nobody's watching yet. Yeah, nobody's watching yet. So, anyway, if you're rewatching later, I'm just waiting for people to come on. Hoping they do. Here we go. Here's the things I've been working on. And I'm gonna demo that, which means I gotta set up some more. Gotta do some plugging in over here. So I've got the new amplifier, which doesn't have a name yet. And right now I've only got, so it's hooked into this Fisher preamp. And I've also been working on this ARXA, and it's working very nicely, but I can't play that. I can't play a record for you on a live stream without getting demonetized. So I want to hook up the tape deck so I can play some old music that is not copyrighted, or at least not copyright protected. We'll play some DOL, if that means anything to anybody out there. Maybe some Jesus Lee Jones. Because it's basically, those are the reasons, those tapes are the main reasons I want to have a working tape deck at all. Okay. Da, da, da. Tape one, playback. Here we go. Hello, I have one person. I will get the laptop out here in a minute to so that I can answer people in chat, but right now I can't see any chat. All right, so firing it up. If you've tuned into the live streams before, this is the amp I've been working on, and I had to totally resituate all the iron and the rectifier. And if you watched before, you might recall that I was experimenting with moving around the power transformer, which was previously sitting right over here, and I unscrewed some stuff, and anyway, I must have caused a short because I blew fuses, but I also, turns out, literally blew out the filament on the old rectifier tube that I was using. It's okay though, I've got plenty of old 5U4s, and I have this brand new Pavane Horizon 274B, which is essentially a 5U4 GB, or actually probably not GB given the shape. Anyway, it's essentially the same thing. Just to brief you on what this amplifier has, it's got 6 CG7s input and phase inverters. And then it's got, well, it would have EL84s, but these are actually Soviet reflector 6P14Ps. We've got Iwistow output transformers, old Magnavox choke, and the RCA power transformer. And it's the RCA chassis, but and now that now that I've reworked things, the power transformer is back to where it was originally. The original configuration would have had the 2 output transformers right here, but these are way too big to fit there. So I've moved those over to here, and now so all the power supply stuff is over here. Rectifier, inverter, rectifier, choke, power transformer, power input module. I previously had the power input module way over here. So I put in another hole, similar rectangular hole, covered the whole thing with a piece of white acrylic. That's essentially pick guard material. It's the same material I used to make a new pick guard for my Rickenbacker bass guitar. I've put the speaker terminals in there, hooked up the wires. I've got and let's put in some music while I get things going here. Tape monitor, source, tape 1. Woo, that's loud shit. So you will have noticed a distinct lack of a hum, whereas the hum was quite audible before. OMG, the range that woman has. brief you on the personnel. Dang, how did I get this going the right way around? So that's DOL, stands for Declaration of Love, back in 1987. And all these people, it's three people, they went on to have long careers in music. None of them hit big time, but went on to do some really cool stuff. So the vocalist, bass player, Paula Fraser, she's still making music as far as I know. You can find her on Instagram, Paula Fraser, Frazer. On guitar was Wade Ogle. Wade is the proprietor of Block Street Records. I think pretty sure Wade still makes music now and again. On drums and vocals, I believe on the next song is Paul Boatwright. Paul Boatwright went on to, okay, so I don't know what group or whatever Paula went on after this. She had a couple of local bands in Fayetteville. I think she's back in the Bay Area now. Wade, guitarist, and went on to sing in a band they called the Faith Healers. I know he's done some other stuff as well. And Paul Boatwright went on to form Pumpkinhead, played lead guitar and sang in that band. And he's still making music. In fact, Pumpkinhead is gonna play another show after all these years on Halloween this year. So check all those folks out if you like that music at all. And this is, this was, I'm pretty sure this was Paul's first band. I believe Wade was older than the rest. I was a little bit, Paul was a couple of years older than me. Paula was older than me, like a couple of years. Paul, maybe a couple of years younger, not sure. Wade, I think, like 10 years older. And if that matters, why does that matter? Oh, well, because I'm pretty sure this was Paul's first band. It was not Paula's first band. She had previously been in a band called Frightwig. And I don't know if it was Wade's first band. First time I knew of Wade, though. Doesn't mean anything, really. Anyway, all right. Let's talk about the amp. So, yes, the amp built on the RCA chassis. Let me bring you in closer. If I can. Well, okay, let's look from the back. I talked in the very, very, very beginning, before anybody was tuned in, about what had gone on with this amplifier. Let's lower you down, give you a better close-up view. It's not super close-up, but I think it'll probably have to do. All right. So, yeah, from the iron side. All right. Well, from the iron side, we'll want to talk about what's on the back side. So so this is the original position of the power transformer, but I had moved the power transformer over to here. And I can't remember the orientation, probably in the orientation it's in, which is a bad idea. Well, it's a bad idea to have the power transformer right next to the input stage, and it's a bad idea to have it at that orientation. Generally, if you're going to have tubes right next to transformers, you want to have this orientation. You want the laminations to be like this so that the magnetic field lines are doing this bit, and so you have a bit of a dead, relatively dead, your magnetic field lines are diverging over here, so you have a less strong magnetic field, such as there is emanating from this device. And especially with a power transformer, which is going to be constantly, emitting a field at 60 hertz. And that's what I was picking up. It was, so with this right next to here and those field lines going through the input stage, I'm getting that 60 hertz hum. And there was really no getting around it unless I got it, and in general, there was no getting around it other than to move the friggin' power transformer away from the input stage like it should have been in the first place. So I moved it back to its original position. Well, now where do I put the output transformers? Because these are pretty big. These are much bigger than the originals, which were right here. I suppose that's neither here nor there, really, but anyway. Well, it wasn't optimal because for those, the laminations were parallel to the laminations of the power transformer, and that's non-ideal. Ideally, you would like to have the laminations of the output transformers perpendicular to the laminations in the power transformer, and so that they can be relatively close to one another, but relatively less visible to one another. Again, talking about the where the field lines are. So I oriented these as close to exactly the center axis of the power transformer. So the center of these is along the center of the axis of the power transformer, or as close as I could get it. And then because the input stage is the particularly sensitive one, and now I've got a transformer, albeit an output transformer, right next to the input stage. I've tried to line up as nearly as I can this output transformer on the axis defined by those two input tubes. All right, and then this one, just what did I do for this one? I mean, it looks like the axis of this one runs right between these two, but I don't know just how intentional that was versus just trying to create some space between these two, but ideally more space between these two. And so, in short, why is this one not as far over this direction as possible? It's because I wanted to line it up with the input stage tubes and then spacing the others accordingly, using the original holes for this one. And of course, now these had to have new holes. Now, where was the rectifier though? The rectifier was originally right here. So in order to move it, I had to cut new holes over here. I had to cut a new 1 1/8 inch hole, which I don't think I'd ever cut a hole that big. That was a scene involving quite a bit of nasty mobile synthetic tool oil. And I don't know if I destroyed the step drill bit or not. Hope not. The choke had been underneath the chassis, or inside over here, mounted to the side. So put it up over here. So now we've got all power supply over here, and we've got all signal over here. Now originally the power input module, so power input module is now right over here, right next to the power transformer. That's awesome. Had been right over here where the power transformer had been. So there was a rectangular hole here. I cut another one, and with a little pillar in between to maintain a little bit more structural integrity to the chassis than if I made one big hole. And then since that's kind of ugly, and also though to have better isolation of signal ground from the chassis, put on this white acrylic plastic plate that I cut myself out of same material that I got to make a new pick guard for my Rickenbacker bass. Okay, let's see. To move the rectifier, there was a big hole here that had to be covered. You can kind of see the edge of the hole that's now been covered with steel plate, and then another hole cut in it for the leads from the output transformer. There were a couple of big holes here that I also covered and also drilled new holes into, and so on. So a lot of new holes. Of course, a new hole had to be cut. I had to cut a new hole for this input module here. Yeah, I left this hole because I'm just not going to bother with covering a hole that size. And yeah, so let me bring it around to the other side, give you a little bit of tour of that side. Tubes are sort of obscure from this angle. Take this off. Okay. It's probably as good as I can do right now. All right. Da-da-dum, da-da-dum. Here we go. Here's the RCA chassis. This is originally, it's an RS177A. And it had a 5U4 rectifier. When I got it, had 6 CG7s, which are for the original circuit. And the original circuit uses 6 BQ5s, aka EL84s. These, however, are 6P14Ps, which are the Soviet mil-spec equivalent. Typically can handle some higher voltage if called upon to do so. Right, just again, the original RCA circuit, not awesome. All the looking into that I did for that basically complained that there was too little gain, that these 6 CG7s don't have a lot of gain to begin with, and given the amount of negative feedback in the circuit, the amplifier was just not providing a whole lot of gain or enough gain for people's liking. And there were some things that could be done about that were relatively simple, such as reconfigure the voltage divider on the input, which was crazy. I mean, right out of the input, there was a voltage divider that halved the signal. And so that was completely unnecessary. So we can do away with that. But, you know, and past that, you can mess around with the amount of negative feedback, but then you can't just change the amount of negative feedback and not change the cathode resistors on those, on that input stage. So I went around looking for circuits and found the HK20, which was a pretty beloved amp of the 50s, I believe. I think it was a mono tube amp back in the day. You know, essentially a 20-watt, nominal 20-watt amp, and used 6 CG7s. And the 6 CG7 is a relatively, like, it is among the lowest distortion triode, you know, sort of small signal triodes that you can find. And so the HK20 takes advantage of that fact and uses very little negative feedback. So whereas, you know, typical values for the feedback resistor would be, say, between 8K and 10K, somewhere in there, this one uses a 68K feedback resistor. And well, let me get the chat going here in a sec. And so much less negative feedback. And so it can you know, basically gets almost all of the gain that's possible to get out of these 6CG7s. Now, I wasn't really feeling the HK20 output stage. I thought, you know, the Morgan Jones output stage, here's my Morgan Jones Beaver Valley over here. And I really like that amplifier. It has a very nice output stage, very well thought out. Although the input stage wasn't as well calculated as it might have been. But given the different input stage on this RCA console chassis, I was still free to use the Morgan Jones output stage, and so that's what I did. And so you see that it has the chassis mounted, let me get a little light on there, a little better. You can see the chassis mounted resistors, power resistors on the top there. And so it's cathode bias. And I make design decisions that do not provide the best gain performance levels. Oh, why did they do that? I don't know. You know, there's a lot of things that they did back in the day that we would do very differently now. So the question was, if you're not looking at the chat, so why would they design it so poorly in the first place? And you know, I think the answer is largely that this was the power amplifier in a console that they didn't feel like, okay, so they didn't, to design it that way without a whole lot of gain, they must have decided they didn't need very much gain. And why didn't they need much gain? Well, they might have, I mean, there would have been a preamp stage, and they might, you know, likely they would have had something like a 12AX7 on that preamp, and that has a, you know, a buttload of gain, and so that would have been fine, and they could have gotten away without having a whole lot of gain on this stage. And then I think they, you know, consoles, they were generally not wanting them to necessarily be able to play all that loud. And they would generally be running things pretty conservatively to maximize tube life. Because, you know, I mean, even though that wasn't, you know, people did and were expected to change vacuum tubes on their gear back in the day, it's still not an awesome thing to have to do. And so they would, you know, to maximize customer satisfaction, they'd want to maximize tube life, I would think. And so I think that's, you know, that sort of figures into some of the decisions that you see the console amp designers having made back in the day. They were being relatively conservative given the, you know, it would have had smaller output transformers, not really designed to produce a lot of bass. There wasn't a lot of bass in any of the mixes back in the day, generally speaking. Yeah, let me get the chat up here. Sorry, guys. Oh, I do have the schematic up here. I don't know that I've updated it completely, but I can go over some of the, I think I have before gone over it a bit, but if you're into it, then it might be interesting for you to see. Oh, this isn't going to work. I'm going to have to move that closer. So I saw something about, you know, might have been worried about extra heat buildup, perhaps, yeah. I mean, this probably would have been mounted to wood on the bottom. You can see it did have some holes drilled in the top, although I've drilled more The original holes just went around the power transformer there. And let's see if I can get this laptop to a place where I can show you cinematic. And for those excellent geeks out there who are curious, we can show you what's going on. It's trying to be careful with various cords and whatnot. It's too damn hot. Okay. It's not the awesomest, but might have to do. All right, so yeah, first of all, put 1 meg here, 10K there. So getting rid of the literally the voltage divider that was here. So this is the input, and yeah, cost cutting was a big deal with all of these console lamps. I mean, they were expensive pieces of things for people to get. Well, yeah, I know, but you know, Swage Pack, it's like Aswag, whatever. Hey, Pack. I need to come up with nicknames for some of y'all. You know, they were obviously building to a price point. They were, because these were not cheap items for people to buy. These were major pieces of furniture. Just as a for example, when I bought my first console, it's this one here that I stripped the amp out of. But in 1958, this went for over $500. Let that sink in. So that was not a cheap piece. These consoles were expensive, and it's why people held on to them so long. It's why you find consoles when people die. And not to be, I don't mean to be morbid about it. It's just that people held on to these until they died because they were such major investments. Even then, they were wag. Okay. Yeah, $500 in 1958. Exactly. I know, right? Now the price came down a little bit in 59, but yeah, I think it was like 516 or something like that. Anyways, over $500 in 1958. It was one of the very first stereo consoles. Maybe the first stereo console other than, I mean, Magnavox had their Concerto Grand or whatever with dual mono big old things, but yeah. Anyway, so here's the HK20 input stage, and I think the clever deal with this is that it reduces the amount of negative feedback on the input stage, thereby making a bypass capacitor unnecessary by linking in the cathode of the input stage to the cathode network on the inverter. And so you've got you've got like 4 milliamps going through here, only 1 milliamp going through here. So any variations in current due to signal here are going to be small relative to the total current going through here. And so that'll reduce the amount of negative feedback. Okay, so then we got, it's not a direct coupled, we've got coupling capacitors here, here, and here. And then here's the Morgan-Jones output stage over here. It's ultralinear and with small resistors on the screen grids and 4.7K grid stoppers. 68P bypass caps on the grid leak resistors, 270 ohm cathode resistors on the 6BQ5s with 470 microfarad bypass caps. It's and the 68P caps are one of the things that does is smooth out any variations on the input capacitance of the various tubes. Yeah, some people do like that nostalgia factor. And I missed that last comment, but you know, I will say people who are into consoles, you know, one of the things they'll call people like me is what do they call us? Ivory hunters, because we go into these old consoles and we take out the ivory, which is for us the amp. You know, but whatever, it is what it is. And you know, there are people who really like these old consoles, but it's a really limited market, even more limited than the market for DIY tube amps. Let's see, what else is important over here? I did use a resistor here. Oh yeah, these the speakers in these old consoles were pretty poor. I mean, I can show you what. Here's one for example. It's a tiny little magnet, paper cone. It would have, you know, that wouldn't have been all, but these didn't reach very far into the base at all. Some of them, sorry. Now you did find occasionally some with some kind of interesting and nifty speakers, like this was from a Magnavox. It's a horn, and I've got a fantasy that I might use this at some point. But I think even that one still would need a super tweeter. Oh, okay, the only other thing I wanted to point out was this little resistance network on the, oh, and this isn't how I designed it. That's a, let me find, yeah, so this is just the basic design for the heater. I'm not sure why I have 50 on there. Not 100% sure everything on here is accurate, but anyway, important bit is that there's a bit of a step down resistor here in series with the filaments. In particular case here, I used a 0.1 ohm single resistor here instead of the two 0.33s in parallel. And last I measured with the 0.1, I was getting a filament voltage of 6.4 volts, which is well within spec. All right, let me get the chat up here, but you don't need to see that. What is this other thing that we see in the camera now? We'll talk a bit about that, but I have been working a lot on unplug for a second. I've been working a lot on this beauty here. And I've shot a bunch of footage. This is a rabbit hole. I'll tell you what. What have we here? We have an ARXA. And this is now in fine playing condition. It's relatively late in the ARXA run. You can tell because it has walnut vinyl veneer rather than real wood. Why did I go about restoring this? I've had it for a while. We're speculating about speaker capacity. I mean, these would have been, you know, these amps, I don't know, probably more than 3 watts they could have taken, but yeah, probably, I don't know. They were crap. So yeah, we can speculate, but sorry, I'm getting my getting the stream up here if I can. All right, I got you up here. Yes, this AR is something special. Now, originally, I had used this turntable just as a prop in a recent video talking about why belt thickness matters. And I wanted to do a follow-up video, and I've shot a lot of footage and taken a lot of measurements to I will get to your questions, Robert Kimball. I shot a lot of footage about getting, so I got 3 different new belts for this. I got one from LP Gear, and if you're familiar with my channel, you know I'm not a big fan of LP Gear these days. Got one from turntableneedles.com. And he sent me one for free. He's an outfit here in town in Corvallis, but he operates, you know, wherever on the web. And I got one from Vinyl Nirvana. I asked him if he would give me one for free, and he declined to give me one for free because he didn't figure he had anything to gain from me doing a comparison of his belt against others. And I did point out that, well, I mean, I can just buy one of your belts and you'd still, whatever. Anyway, right now I've got the turntableneedles.com belt on there. And, you know, so I borrowed a nicer set of calipers, digital calipers that go down to 1/100th of a millimeter to take a bunch of width measurements and or thickness measurements and width measurements. The LP Gear one is kind of fascinating because it just doesn't even try to approximate the original thickness of the belt. So here's the Vinyl Nirvana belt. You can see it's a thin belt. And Dan from the Tubester is cool. This is the LP Gear belt. It's like, dudes, seriously? You're not even gonna try? All right. And I've got the Shure test record that has a 1 kilohertz tone, and so I played the tone. I'm not so psyched about the results because of the tendency for modulation variations on that 1 kilohertz tone. Like literally, if I'm sitting here listening to it and I turn my head, the magnitude of the tone changes dramatically. Just it's weird. So um, yeah, all right. Anyway, that's the idea. I may get to a video of that, but I'm not entirely sure that I won't just scrap that and take the Vinyl Nirvana guy's suggestion and use a different turntable as a demo. Because I've also got an LP gear belt that I got for Pioneer PL 514 for my well, and my son has a PL 514 and with also an LP gear belt, but a sort of a probably an earlier supplier LP gear belt that actually is good. And I had a friend build me a belt grinder. So I don't know. I don't know where that's going. I'm also working on a video talking about the restoration of this, but you know, for those of you tuning in, I can go through some of that, what I did here. So first thing, of course, was to prepare these surfaces here and on the small gear because they were pretty crusty. You know, Vinyl Nirvana guy suggests using an abrasive pad to get off the old crap. And I was like, man, I don't want to take off metal. I don't want to change the nature of the finish. And so I just went at it with mother's polish like crazy until I got it to something that I thought was satisfactory on both this surface and these surfaces. So that was pretty time consuming. Of course, I polished this up just for aesthetics. There was a question of what cartridge, you know, so when I got this, it had somebody put a Bang & Olufsen cartridge on there with an adapter, which actually probably not a bad idea. I mean, these tone arms are really light and so need relatively high compliance styli / cartridge. So Bang & Olufsen might have been good. Seems like the Bang & Olufsen's tone arm is super light, so I don't know. A lot of people use, well, there are a couple of different cartridges that people tend to use on these, and I went with one of those because it's one that I had. I have that that Gemini DJ table over there, and somebody put a Shure VM95 ED on it, and I took that off of there and put it on here. And I had already bought a new stylus for that from LP Gear. Again, I'm not just like totally harshing on LP Gear. They're fine for some things and have been fine. And I will say that while I have found some of the belts that I've gotten from LP Gear during a certain period of time to have way too much variation in thickness, the thickness variation on this one for the ARXA is pretty small. Like this is a really uniform belt, comparable to the uniformity of the other two, the Vinyl Nirvana and the Turntable Needles belts. So, yeah, I don't know. I got a batch of belts from LP Gear at some point that were just not acceptable quality, really. Anyway, all right, what else? Let's go around the back side. Yeah, you know, the reason I say I know they were unacceptable is because when I measured WoW and Flutter, it was way out of spec for the belts that I'm talking about, and for one of them, I could see it was a dual turntable. I could see that there was a variation in the belt that was causing variation in the speed of the platter. It was really ridiculous. All right, so check it out. I replaced all the cables, so I've got a new cloth covered power cord. my friend Chris gave me the cables from a Riga P9 turntable. See over here, it has the Nutric Profi connectors. Pull those off so you can ooh and ah at those. Look at that. Ooh. Ah. All right. Now, initially, the original grounding configuration for the XA puts the ground on the shield of the left channel. And that's actually similar to what the P9 did, but I was getting some nasty hum depending on whether the cables were separated or not and so on. And so I just added a ground wire. So that's grounded to the chassis now. And I know, right? It's beautiful. So I've got, yeah, Riga P9 cables. I've wrapped them with this polyethylene wrap. It's like Radio Shack initially. I got, I'll show you the packaging. I got a new old stock spiral cable wrap, polyethylene, 10 feet, and used quite a bit of it. And it worked out really nicely, I think. I mean, so I twisted the two signal cables and the ground together and then wrapped all those with the spiral cable wrap. And it's beefy as all get out. But you know, any kind of hum problem has gone away completely, and it just sounds really nice. And I think you'll just have to wait for a video for me to prove that to you, because if I put more than like, you know, so here I'm going to give away my, you know how some of you, all you tune in pretty much will know that I often almost always put music samples in my videos. I keep them strictly to 5 seconds exactly. Any longer than that, and I get dinged for copyright. And so managing to put more, you know, exactly 5 seconds of audio sample on a live stream is not really feasible. Oh, well, let's ogle some more at this. I polished the heck out of that brass counterweight. It is just super shiny now. It was dingy looking. I polished the aluminum here. Oh, yeah, well, and so what is the thing you want a turntable? What is the thing you really want the XA to do? You want it to spin smoothly and uniformly. And what happens over time is there's a thrust plate down there. You've got the bearing. I'm not going to pull it all apart. But so that center platter deal, this lifts out, and then it's got a thing about yay long on the end there that sticks into the bearing well. And then there's like a ball bearing, sort of a semi-ball hemisphere of a ball bearing carved onto the, you know, machined onto the bottom of that spindle. And then that rides on a thrust plate, a plastic thrust plate sitting in the bottom of the well there. And then of course there's bearing oil in there. And those thrust plates get dimpled, and the steel ball bearing component gets dimpled as well. And so I polished the ball bearing part to 3000 grit, you know, got it nice and smooth. And I literally just flipped the thrust plate over and polished that underside surface so it's nice and smooth. And I did it's a similar setup for the tone arm, although there's actually a ball bearing in there. It was in fine shape, and it of course it bears much less mass, much less weight than does the platter bearing, and it's a bigger ball bearing. So that ball bearing was just fine, but the thrust plate there was again a bit dimpled. So again, I flipped it and polished it, and so I've got really nice. I mean, I'll just demonstrate. I'll undo the belt here and demonstrate this, the relatively frictionless rotation. Let me hear it. Ooh. Ah. Right? Right? Tell me that's not sexy. All right. Put the belt back on. Um, there are a couple of capacitors under the hood there. One's on the power switch over here, and one's on the motor, which is over here. And I replaced both of those. I think. I mean, the motor is sealed. I did. Um, I did oil it, but not internally. So one, when I fired it up, it was kind of noisy. So I consulted the AI, and it told me to pull off this thing, put a couple of drops on the top there, run it for a day or two to let that oil penetrate. And after a day or two, it was way quieter. It's still like you hold your ear up next to it, you can hear it, but it's it's quiet. And so I mean, it's not like there isn't room for improvement at all, but I think to me it's acceptable and doesn't warrant the condition of the motor doesn't warrant taking it apart, because that is essentially, if you're going to take it apart, you got to be ready for that dismantling to be unsuccessful, in the sense that you might need to replace the motor. And I think it's just fine. I haven't done anything with the pivoting, the bearings way up here. It seems fine to me. And I know that there's mods that people do to these. I know people put on new head shells. People, find that where the head shell mounts here is broken because there's a piece of plastic in there. I'll show you. Let me bring the camera back around. I'll show you what I'm talking about. This, probably because it's relatively late in the run, everything is in pretty good condition, relatively speaking, to some of the things that you see online. Um, so this bit of plastic can break, but this one's fine. So why mess with it? You can strip this plastic for the head shell can crack or break or whatever. Originally, it would have been Bakelite. I don't know that it's still Bakelite in, say 1980 maybe when this was made. Who knows? I haven't looked up the serial number. But the plastic is fine, so there's very little adjustment possible for mounting the cartridge, and so I've just tried to mount it as much parallel to the sides of the head shell as possible. And I think I can get close enough where you can see the model on the cartridge. That is a Shure M91ED. And it sounds really nice. I thought it sounded really nice when I had it on the DJ table, and thought, boy, put that on really nice turntable, and I bet that'll sound really good. Or let me say, be really nice tone arm, because I don't think there's anything particularly bad about that turntable, but the tone arm is crap. uh, so anyway, oh, let's see. Does that wrap up what I did with this? I had to do a bit of rewiring in there, uh, but I'm not going to show that to you right now. I did polish this up and sand it a bit with, so I went at this with some 3000 grit and Plastex. It's, you can tell that it's still pretty scuffed up, but the scuffs are not as offensive as they were before. In fact, these are sort of scuffs. It'd be like, okay, well, it's an old turntable. I can deal with that. Previously, the scuffs and marks were really, really jumped out. So while it's not perfect, I think it's acceptable, at least to me. And also because it's a it's a dust cover that's removed rather than that sits there on it while you're playing it. So most of the time, you're not looking at the condition of the dust cover. And isn't that just a handsome turntable now? I thought about redoing the veneer, putting new veneer on the frame, but I opted not to. The veneer is in near perfect condition. And so while it's vinyl and it's not awesome that it's vinyl, it with everything cleaned up and operating nicely, I don't mind it. So, yeah, pretty psyched, really. Let's see what we got coming in here. Let's see, there's a discussion of speakers going on, which I'm just going to leave alone. So I did not. So yeah, it is a. So there, people do everything to these, right? They will replace all sorts of stuff, including the springs. So it's got like a T frame um, under there, sub plinth, sub frame. So goes from like here to here, and then from there over to here, and and the springs and so on, and the springs are dampened with just your basic open cell crap foam that I'm surprised isn't disintegrating, but it seems like it's in fine, perfect condition as far as I can tell. So again, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Um, and yeah, it seems to be working really nicely now. So, well, I suppose I'm sure there's still room for improvement. I don't really feel that I don't really feel that the effort and expense are warranted at this stage, given that it's sounding really good. Um, you know, like similarly here on the bench, still got a little bit of 60 hertz hum, but it's down to about 4 millivolts per channel, and I can't hear it. Or maybe I can. I don't know. Let's see. If I go stick my head up next to the speakers, can I hear it? Probably. Actually, no, I can't even hear the hum. All I can hear is a bit of hiss, and I'm pretty sure the hiss is coming from the preamp. So, yeah, I'm pretty psyched about the amp. Um, let's talk about next steps, because I think that might be fun. Because the next steps involve making it more beautiful. Because I like tube amps. And I've told you before that one of the reasons I like tube amps is because they look nice. I mean, look at that tube. It's friggin' beautiful. That's just the rectifier tube, but hell, why not make it an ornament? You know, the tubes themselves, they look nice. You might recall that I initially had a different sort of uh, color on the spray paint that I've just put on the top. Um, and I needed to repaint it because I had scarred up the paint job and in putting in the new holes and everything. And I also wanted to paint the plates, the steel plates that I'd put to cover some of the holes. And you can kind of see right here, for example, lean over there, you can see one of those covered holes there. And so it needed to be repainted. And so I just grabbed a can of spray paint that I thought was the same spray paint that I had used on it. Turns out it was not. Whereas previously I had been using antique brass. This is anodized bronze, which is what I ended up using on the grills for my ADS L730s. The antique brass is what I believe I used on the steel grills on my ADS L520s. This anodized bronze is way more similar to the original paint on those ADS steel grills. Let's plug the camera back in. Oh, somebody flushed the toilet. We are in the basement after all. Or I am, and you by proxy. All right, so I think that spray paint is better. I like it better. It's subtler. It's going to show imperfections less, um, and it is less of a contrast with the old unpolished steel. So what are we going to do here? Well, some time ago, I worked on some pieces, including this one. This is a piece of solid cherry from the tree in my backyard. It's not perfectly cut, but it's, I would say, ornamentally finished and cut. And I believe is beautiful, finished only with raw linseed oil. And then I made these end pieces, and I'd done these originally for a Magnavox Amp 175 chassis. And I just never got around to uh, using one of my Amp 175 chassis to build a new amp, and got this one from a friend and decided this was the one I was going to build on next because of the output stage tubes. Now these are longer than the sides of this, but longer's better than shorter. I can sacrifice a bit of their length and cut them to fit, and I believe that is going to look very nice. I will. So I went to my local hardware store / lumber store today. These are 1/2 inch coarse thread, not 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch bolt 20 pitch or 20 threads per inch. I was like, okay, I'll just get the bolts and I'll put the feet on there. And I was almost going up to the counter to check out, and I was like, wait a minute, how am I going to mount the wood? Because the way I've done it before with, for example, the Beaver Valley over there, and with, oops, sorry, with my first, what? Oh, with my first Magnavox console rebuild, I've just, I've got rubber feet under there, and the wood screws go through the holes in the lip of the chassis there into the wood here. And decided, uh, while it would seem a bit more sporty to be able to use the machine screw threads on here, I don't have to. I can just put a wood screw up through there and screw into here, and probably chisel out, these bits to accommodate that stuff so that this will sit flush down on that steel lip there. So that it'll sit nicely. Oh, and I'll need to chisel out. There's a bolt sticking through the side over here. Right there. I forget what's mounted to that, but something that needs to be mounted there. And so I'll, carve out a little bit to accommodate that so this can sit nice and flush against the side and against the bottom of that lip, and then be fastened to the feet through those holes, and then just glue the front plate, face plate, whatever you want to call it, on to the wood, so that these three pieces will form a single piece that's glued together. And trying to remember if I think that's what I've done with the Beaver Valley there, with that ash on the front and the walnut veneered side pieces. It's what I did with a previous AMP 175 chassis that I built my BV6V6 on, with, so when I initially made these side pieces, I made 4 of them, and 2 I've used, and I made 2 face plates, and 1 I've used. And so I still have these sitting here for years, and I think it's time to use them. I think this is the amp to use them on, even though I'll have to cut down those, but I think that's fine. I think this is a beautiful amp now with that, like that. Right? Oh, dovetailed? Sorry, I'm not that kind of woodworker. I know. Dovetailed would be nice, except that this is plywood. It's just cherry veneer on plywood. So having that plywood dovetail sticking out wouldn't actually look all that nice. I mean, I don't know. I think it'll look better just covered, and it was only ever intended to be covered. Let's see. Oh, and like I've done previously, like again for the Beaver Valley and for at least one other amp, I've put expanded steel underneath, which just means that people's fingers can't get up in there and contact high voltage, but allows a lot of air circulation. My son Alden borrowed my truck today to go to Portland, so I don't have my truck to go to Home Depot. I went to Spaith, lumber and hardware, but they don't have uh, expanded steel. I'm just talking about you know, this thing, this kind of thing. You can get at Home Depot. And it's not, there's nothing fancy about it, but you can cut it with snips, and it does fine. And it's, you know, it never really needs to be looked at, so it's not ornamental, but it's not ugly. I don't think. I mean, at least compared to the relative industrial sort of design aesthetic of the amp already. And yeah, rubber feet, that's good. I mean, I think I've got some of the rubber feet over here. Yeah, just, you know, basic rubber feet like that. And screw through there. Oh, you know what? I'm remembering that a record that I played on one of my shorts didn't get dinged for copyright at all, I don't think. I might risk it. Stand by. So I'm back. And I think I'm just going to wrap up this this live stream. It's just too much chaos to deal with, like actually trying to do this work on camera. I did just want to touch base with y'all and let you know what I was up to. But so I got this album recently. Now I know probably a lot of you are like me, you're rock heads, but this is rock and roll right here. Tchaikovsky's Fourth Symphony in F minor. And this is a serious recording, Telarc Digital. Recorded apparently in the Zell shell. Love this image here. Got the bass drum sitting way in the back here. You got your timpani. I mean, like everybody's sitting just so, mic'd just so. ADS monitors, distributed by Audio Technica. And Cleveland Orchestra conducted by Lauren Maisel. This is rock and roll. And Tchaikovsky couldn't plug in, yo, so I'll just say I'm going to fade out here because I'll probably have to cut some of this off the end of the replay for it to remain monetized. Let's see how long it takes this one to spin up to speed. Let's get the frame. apparently the reason that it's recommended to put talc on the belt is so that it can slip while it's getting up to speed, so that it puts less strain on the motor itself.
Right?
All right, for those of you tuning in live, I will give you a taste of the finale, which is Tchaikovsky was off the hook, man. At least on this one. I haven't. I didn't. I had a box set of like all his symphonies at some point. Never really got into any of them except this one. It is just, it is the rock and roll symphony as far as I'm concerned. My favorite symphony ever. That one gets me every time. hey, uh, da-da-da-da. So cheers, everybody. Nice talking to you. And I'll try to get another video out soon. Not sure which one it's going to be. Hell, might be from my little adventure in the Coast Range with my son Alden the other day. But anyway, we'll see. Cheers, y'all.